and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. And you know, today is a very special day on the show because our guest is a pioneer of living and working sustainably. Paul Hawken's work spans ideas, generations, and industries. He's an environmentalist, author, entrepreneur, and globally recognized expert on sustainable living. He was also the founder of Erewhon, a pioneering natural food company, garden and home retailer Smith Hawken, and Energy Everywhere, a low-cost solar company. In his new book, Regeneration, Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation, continues the work he launched in 2017 with the book Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. You can learn more about Paul at paulhawken.com. That's Paul Hawken, all one word. Hawken is Hawken, if you didn't know. And you can also check out Regeneration in bookstores, on Audible, and at the Regeneration website, regeneration.org, where many of his ideas in the book are available to read for free. He and his team have outlined more of the solutions to climate change than any other source. And we're going to ask him to spend a few minutes of our conversation today to coach all of us on making smart, environmentally aware decisions. Welcome to the show, Paul Hawken. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Likewise, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, Paul, you know, the first thing I wanted to ask you, because you have been telling people about the threats of our extractive approach to our economy for more than 50 years. And how is it that you have stayed motivated and focused on the opportunity for environmental progress over the course of a period of time in which nature has not been coming out on the good end of the story?
It's a good question. I mean, nature is definitely getting, I wouldn't say demolished, but definitely degraded, universally everywhere in all ecosystems and biomes. But what is really at risk is civilization. Mm-hmm. And because nature can recover quite well. It regenerates spectacularly, as a matter of fact. And civilizations don't do that, at least haven't in the past. And we are in one. We're in an amazing civilization. And so it's not that I feel optimistic or anything about the future, but I do feel like the conversation has to be with people. It can't be with nature directly. Mm-hmm. Of course, it is indirectly all the time. And so I feel like that within human beings is this innate sense of wanting to be regenerative, because if we look at the term just from a biological point of view, well, we are regenerating. There's all 30 trillion cells who are doing it right this second between you and I. That's why we can hear each other and see each other. And it's a default mode of life. And I feel like it manifests itself every day within human beings in terms of what they care about. They care about, their own body. They care about their children. They care about their family, their neighbor, their church, their synagogue, their mosque. They care about, the company they created, the company they work for. They care about plants, animals, the places they live, their history, we are a caring species. And I feel like the whole climate, shall we call it, I don't know what to call it, but I mean, the way climate has been languaged, and I'm an English major and I realize languaging is not a verb, okay? So, but the way it's been languaged has absolutely guaranteed that 98% of humanity will be disengaged from it, which is absolutely what has happened. 98% of people don't do anything. They may understand it or care about it in the sense of emotionally, empathetically. But in terms of day-to-day practices and looking forward to their footprint, their impact, they do not do anything. And I don't blame people for that, by the way. And so that's why I keep writing and, trying to, create some sort of entry point, into people that gives them an understanding that actually reversing global warming is in their best interest on all levels. And that hasn't been the story.
Well, and Regeneration, your new book, as well as Drawdown, your previous book, I have to say are the most comprehensive collection of solutions for climate change, for restoring the environment, and I think for restoring our society in a lot of ways. It's an idea that integrates reconnecting with our humanity and with nature. But as you just talked about with regard to languaging, the way that we have communicated about this, it's often focused on the negative, the bad things that are going to happen or have happened already. How do you see the role of storytelling, the media, internet, podcasts like this one, social networks contributing to regeneration? I guess another way to ask it is, what of those things should we be thinking about keeping? And are there ideas or ways of languaging that we should drop?
The communication about climate, global warming, so-called climate change, which I want to get back to in a minute, by the way, because I don't think that's a proper term, has been very much about fear and threat. It came from science originally, which is we have a future existential threat, and threat means fear. And then now it got picked up by activists and they elaborated on the threat into shame and blame and guilt and ought to, should, must. And those kind of things really do trump good news or stories or narratives, because they light up the amygdala, and the amygdala is actually the interactive part of the brain, that is about survival and so forth. And so the media knows that. That's clickbait. That's the click through. That's what lights us up. That's what gets us going, and so forth. And so, but the climate narrative has been primarily about probabilities of what's going to go wrong and when it's going to go wrong, and it's going faster or longer than we thought it was. And this is the impact, the implications of that. And, and those are fascinating stories, and I don't dispute them so much as they're not counterbalanced by possibility. And so if we see global warming as just a threat, which is the way it's portrayed, and therefore we have to fight, tackle, combat, mitigate. I mean, these are verbs, and verbs aren't goals. So when I created Drawdown, I did two things. One is I want to name the goal, which the goal is not net zero, and the goal certainly isn't fighting, combating, and tackling. It is actually to reverse global warming. Can we just put that, as our goal, so we know where we're going? And that seemed obvious to me. And then in Drawdown did, map, measured, and modeled the 100 most substantive solutions to reversing global warming, because that had never been done, so I don't know why. But on a deeper level, we still tend to look at the solutions as things that are takeaways. They take away something. They remove something.
Trade-off.
They're a trade-off. Yeah, that's the term that's being used. Like, well, you could have this, but we really shouldn't, because we should do this because, and that just goes right over the head of most people, and should, by the way, because it's full of jargon and acronyms and, and terms that just don't mean anything. It's climate speak, and climate speak doesn't win people over and so forth. So what regeneration is very much about is it has the most complete listing in the website, regeneration.org, of climate solutions and how to get them done, because most people after Drawdown came to me and said, well, yeah, but what should I do? What should I do? Came up again and again and again, or I don't know how to do that, and they were willing and sincere, but at the same time, it wasn't really, clicking for them, in terms of what activity they should undertake. And I think that the thing about regeneration is it's really a different framing. Mm-hmm. It's a different lens to look at it. It's a lens where we are not separate. Because when you talk about fighting climate change, you've othered it. That's othering language. You've made it, first of all, somewhere. Where is it? You can't find it. It doesn't exist that way. Climate is an outgrowth of the changing atmosphere. The atmosphere is changing because of greenhouse gases, and so forth. But the atmosphere and the biosphere are one thing. They're not two different things. The atmosphere,
and we're part of it.
Yeah. Well, we're breathing it. We're inhaling it, so when we other it that way, then we separate ourselves, from nature, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the cause of the problem. That's the mindset that caused the problem. Like we could stick stuff into the ocean or into our rivers, or we can stick in the ground, or we can use glyphosate and then we can't drink the water, later from our wells. I mean, we have othered the planet by thinking that we're separate from it. And we're doing the same thing with our rhetoric around climate.
I'm even struck by Jeff Bezos' vision of we'll just move all the polluting stuff into space.
Yeah.
So it's kicking the can down the road. Now, when I read Regeneration, and your ideas, particularly about the relationship of humanity and nature, I was struck by the fact that so many people embrace this idea of the wisdom of crowds, but they don't recognize that they're part of this natural crowd. We're not separate from nature, but we're part of a crowd that includes everything from single-cell organisms to giraffes and school kids who face the challenge of climate change.
Right.
And how do you suggest that we start to find our place or rediscover our place in that astonishing diversity, because we've simplified and othered so much of it?
Well, for some people, that is a really important pathway to understanding. And for other people who live in cities, who live in confined areas, who live in impoverished conditions, where their daily needs are not a given every day. In other words, they wake up every morning with current existential threat, and they have to deal with that and so forth. For those people, the idea of becoming more familiar and seeing one's inseparability from nature is abstract, because they actually don't even get out to nature. They're not there, at all. And so we have to understand, how can we look at this in a way that brings us together in our inseparability from each other and nature, that applies to all levels of society, not just those who are privileged enough, like, for example, myself, I look out a window, I look out on a forest, I don't see a single house, and I chose to live here for that reason, but most people don't have that privilege at all, and so I think about it, and that's why in the book I wrote about people, and I said, if you want to know what to do about global warming and the climate crisis, ask the people who are paying the highest price.
Mm-hmm.
And that's children, that's women, indigenous people, and people who live in impoverished conditions. And if you listen to them, they'll tell you what to do. They know.
A moment ago, you said that climate change or global warming is not the right term.
No.
So when you talk to people, how do you suggest approaching the climate crisis when starting a conversation with friends or family about how much we need to change?
Well, I mean, global warming is a scientific fact, okay? That we know. And we know that warming changes two things, jet streams and ocean currents. And those are that complex fluid dynamic relationship between those two creates climate. And climate is creates weather, and then weather impacts us. Okay. So global warming is fine, because that is just a fact, and that's physics, frankly. It's nothing theoretical at all. Climate change, when we say we want to fight climate change, it's like, well, wait, hold on. The climate is supposed to change. It changes every nanosecond. And furthermore, if it didn't change, we'd be in big trouble. And the fact is that you can't fight change. Do
you roll with it, or do you shape it?
Well, it's the climate change is not the problem. The climate is perfect.
As a system.
It's always perfect,
mm-hmm.
because it is a manifestation of the biosphere, and I include the atmosphere in the biosphere. It's a manifestation of it, and we are affecting the biosphere profoundly, which includes the atmosphere. And so, it's not the climate that's changing out there somehow that's the problem, and so forth. Like I say, nature never makes a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
It's nature, as we do. And so, by putting it out there, we look away actually from cause. That's the problem with fighting climate change. Bad verb, bad object.
And going back to the trade-off concept, a lot of what we are told about our opportunity to change or impact it involves pushing aside the real consequences and focusing only on the benefit. That's how we get greenwashing. Now, there's a phrase that we've all talked about for years, which is manage natural resources. How do you do that regeneratively? Or does the phrase manage natural resources represent a fundamental misunderstanding of a relationship with a nature that is perfect, but now 1.1 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than it was 150 years ago?
Yeah, well, I mean, that verb is a delicate one. I mean, we have been managing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's mismanaged.
Yeah.
And
so can we manage, or should we rethink the verb?
Yeah, we should rethink the verb, because when you manage something, you think they don't. You know, it's like a herd of cow. You're going to manage the herd. Okay, great. But, or maybe not. But nevertheless, the point being is that there is a hierarchical relationship then to nature, which is that we understand what it should be, and it, whatever it is, doesn't. We know better. That manage is a funny word that way. It's a troubling word. I don't think of the 5,000 indigenous cultures in the world, and some that have been here for 60,000 years, okay, or at least they have a record of 60,000 years and so forth, would ever use the word manage. That they're, and just like the, Onondaga and the Sioux Nation talk about all our relations, those are our relations, you don't manage your relations, you relate. And so, I think we have a lot to learn from, which we overlooked and almost destroyed, which is in indigenous cultures, indigenous wisdom. And the reason, I mean, calling it wisdom is sort of like, placing it in a museum shelf. I don't mean it that way. I mean, that the people who lived here for a long, long time and successfully, they wouldn't be here today, or at least up until the conquest, they practiced observational science. They knew where they lived, and they developed extraordinary understanding. And we didn't understand their understanding because we thought they were illiterate. And yes, it's true. Most didn't have a written way of recording knowledge and passing it on. They had different means of doing that, and it's called the hippocampus. They had extraordinary memory. There's 700 different narratives in the Dene culture describing insects. 700 different insects. Come on, find me an entomologist who can name 700. And that is in stories. The song lines of the Aboriginal are songs that describe when you get on a migratory path and you land in this place, you arrive in this place, what's going on there and what to be careful of and what to eat and how to leave it better for the people who follow you. I can go to so many stories, and you look at indigenous languages, often metaphorical.
Yeah.
And the metaphors are actually, the language teaches you how to live in that place. And importantly, they teach you how to be a keystone species, which is, and that is to say, well, my role is to leave it better for the future than today, for my descendants and our, culture. And we know what keystone species are in nature, wolves and beavers and bees and hummingbirds and so forth. And we understand that, these creatures, by just the act of living, then create the conditions for more life. And so you go back to regeneration, and I'm going to switch on you right now. Regeneration is actually having an economy, having a culture, having a society, solutions that create more life instead of less. And degeneration is an economic, cultural, economic practice that takes life. It degenerates life. It harms it, destroys it, takes it. That's degeneration. And what we can see is that road ends, not very far from now, because that's what all the news is going at us, telling us. And, it's not just drought and fire and Hurricane Ida and migration. And I mean, it's screaming at us, and we can see at the end of that road. So regeneration is really say, like, can we have a conversation? Can we do a 180? Can we pivot? can we actually create a world in which we're healing the future instead of stealing it? Because that's what we're doing. We're just stealing the future from our children and their children, if they're even here. And so regeneration is, again, the innate capacity of nature and of human beings until the Western Eurocentric post-Enlightenment culture descended upon the world.
Well, you just made me think of several different things. And I'm sorry to run them down very quickly, but I've been asking indigenous speakers who have been on the show how others can embrace the indigenous way of life, to take that responsibility for the future. But I also realized, as you were talking about the entomologist, one of the most amazing afternoons of my entire life was spending the day with E.O. Wilson in his lab at Harvard. And the conversation was deeply metaphorical in the way that you're talking about. And I think Ed, of all the people I've ever met, probably does know 700 insects. But
yeah, you probably can.
The rest of us don't. But his metaphors have engaged an entire generation. It shaped your writing as well as mine and others. As we think about becoming more related to our environment, you talk about the idea of agency being critical. But human agency is often accompanied by the arrogance that you've described in a variety of ways as well. So what advice do you have for people who want to lead, who want to try to shape that future, about how to communicate and take that position humbly so that it's not directive?
Well, I mean, E.O. Wilson is a perfect example. What did he do? He was a scientist.
Yeah.
Okay. And he studied and he learned and he published and he spoke. Mm-hmm. He didn't try to become agency. And look at the impact he's had. I mean, every individual is part of a network which they know and understand. And so what we've done, I think, in the climate movement and whatever that is in the most amorphous sense, is individuate the problem. Mm-hmm. This is what you can do, as if and that was created by Ogilvy and Mather in 2001, working for British Petroleum and the carbon footprint. And we just pump oil and make gas out of it. You actually are driving and it's like we're innocent. We're just doing what you need. And and that individuation then made people feel like, wow, there's not much I can do. I'll recycle the plastic. I'll do this. And, but I know it's not sufficient to the task at hand that science is telling us. And then what happens is we all then devour, articles about the Conference of the Parties. And we look to big corporations. We say, well, they're the ones who have to change, policy and activity and what they do on a corporate level. Also. And then what's missing is the middle between those two poles, which is huge institutions and the isolated individual. And the fact is that, and I'm sure E.O. Wilson would agree with me, but the dream of every cell is to become two cells, okay? And we're made of cells. And when we're true, I think, to ourselves and to what we care about and to our passion and to how we interrelate and understand the world around us and so forth, we communicate and our very existence becomes a dyad. And there's two people, then become 4 and 8 and 16 and 32. It's hard to say how many people E.O. Wilson has influenced profoundly and still is. And I think every one of us has that capacity, not to the extent that E.O. Wilson does, but then he got that way not by accident, but by falling in love with the living world. That's how he got there, And so all of us have that capacity in some way or another. There is no question in my mind. So all of us have agency, and it really depends on us being in touch with our heart, our truest self, that part of us that cares, and caring is innate again to Homo sapiens. I mean, that's why we're here, not Neanderthals. We know that now. And we work together. We solve problems together. We like to be together. So it wasn't a dominant culture. It was, it was a collegial culture, Homo sapiens. And that's where the solution to reversing global warming. And I think that one of the things that's missed in the narrative about the Conference of the Parties and these delegates and ministers and, lobbyists and big corporations all in the blue zone, staying up all night trying to figure out all these agreements that
makes a great story.
A great story. And it's almost next to meaningless in the sense that there are agreements, there are commitments, there's no penalties, there's no enforcement, there is no even measurement of it. I mean, it's crazy. We don't even measure what these countries are doing, and they don't want us to either, many of them. Mm-hmm. And so that is the opposite of what makes change. And I think it obscures the fact that regeneration is a burgeoning movement in the world today. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of organizations that are doing it. And the only place you can do it, which is in place where you are, your region, your farm, your county, your province, your forest, your degraded land that you're restoring, your desert environment, this is where it's happening, and it's in the cities. It's in the inner city. It's in everywhere where people are, and so this is what's happening. And I'm glad the meeting. I'm glad it got that attention. It's wonderful. It should happen every year. Praise be. And I think really the real work happens in the green zone, not in the blue zone. Frankly, where all the NGOs and activists are meeting and exchanging pheromones with their antenna. I mean, that's really where it's happening. That's the ants that E.O. Wilson describes, from my point of view. But but it obscures the fact that human beings do care and they're on it. And that's why I wrote Blessed Unrest, Mitch, which is we have no idea what's going on out there in the positive sense. We just don't, because we are inundated by what's going wrong.
Well, and look, in the Ecology of Business was one of the first books that really woke me up to the opportunity that business has to participate in this. And leadership really seems to be populating the space with the knowledge necessary for people to make their own informed decisions in this environment. So in some sense, the net may be part of our path out of this problem.
Could be.
Everything that goes with it is part of the cost that we have to address as well. But could I ask you just to step into the role of a coach for a few minutes, because our listeners do want to take actions, and regeneration.org has incredible resources for doing so. But let me ask, what would your advice be about how to choose food? What are your simple rules, the Paul Hawken rules for choosing food?
Well, actually, there's a question that precedes it, which is food. It's understanding that food has a profound impact on global warming. Mm-hmm. And you can't disaggregate food from agriculture. I mean, they're kith and kin. And we now know from a recent piece in Nature and Food that those two sectors combined are 35% of global emissions. Okay. Number one. And it used to be transport, and they were kind of about the same. It's not. It's food. So that's number one. Just understand that instead of looking far away, say, "Oh, what can I do to solve this?" You're staring at it 3 times a day. And so that is a portal really to understanding, one's impact. And so obviously it's what you choose to eat, how what you choose is created, by what means. And so those two things, combined, can change the impact of an individual or a family or a cafeteria or a school even, from a very highly emitting, greenhouse gas producing activity to one that actually doesn't, or even sequesters carbon. And so there's a huge range of outcomes depending on how we interact with our food system. And the thing about that, Mitch, is that it goes further though, which is, and I might digress here, because if I had said at the beginning of the book, everything's connected, you go, it's like,
okay,
it's true. It's true. It's a truism. It's a cliche. And, it's like, so in the book itself, what happens is connections are made, all of a sudden you go along and go, oh, this is connected to this. You go, oh, the reader, for the reader, it's like, oh, who knew? Exactly. Who knew? That's so fascinating. It's so interesting that these things that you thought were disconnected or disparate actually are very intimately connected. Okay. So the reader, what I try to do is create spaciousness so the reader can come to the conclusion themselves, which is like, wow, it's all connected. Mm-hmm. But it's not me telling them, it's not like, I know you, don't listen up. That really doesn't work. And who's to say I know anyway? You know what I mean? It's like sharing, this is what we know, not I know, what we know about this and that. And one of the things we know is that 60% of the food in the United States is ultra processed food. And that's food created by big food that biohacked our taste buds, because we have a strong predilection for salt, sugar, and fat, because those things were scarce in our evolution. And so our taste buds are like all light up around those. And so big food has hacked it and just creates all different types of substances that are sweet, fatty, salty, that basically are not food. They're chemical experiments. Mm-hmm. And they cause 70% of the disease in the United States is metabolic disease. Pharma loves it because
and we tend to create industries that create their own patients, who then create new industries.
Well, and we have a sick care system. We don't have a health care system.
Right.
And the sick care system loves to say, oh, diabetes, high blood pressure. Oh, great. Here's what you take every day. Mm-hmm. For the rest of your life. Yeah. That's why 20% of our GDP is on sick care system, includes pharma. And we have the 33rd worst health outcome in the world. And so that goes back to food. And then big food is basically telling big ag what it wants. And what it wants is soy and corn for high fructose corn syrup, oil from soy, fat, and the salt that gets from the ocean, and good to go, and also sugarcane, excuse me. And so it's basically it's kitchen. and so it can be Cheetos, it can be Fritos, it can be, Mountain Dew, which is the crack cocaine of soft drinks made by Pepsi. There's all sorts of manifestations of it, but so forth, is killing us, and it's killing the land. And so that food decision that you make for yourselves, if you're mom and dad, for your children and so forth, if you have a school where you make it for children again, but also other children, these are amazing things. I was with Alice Waters yesterday, the founder of Chez Panisse, and the executive vice president of the University of California, Berkeley, where I grew up. And they are dedicated and focused on changing the whole commissary system, the whole food system at UC Berkeley into local, direct, farmer to kitchen, regenerative, organic, and to cut out, the middleman, the Cisco, the big companies that, send in these tins of food, and or allowing Pepsi-Cola pays the University of California, Berkeley, $1.4 million every year to have the exclusive soft drink machines everywhere on the campus. Yep. This kind of craziness and so forth. So what an individual can do here is extraordinary. At home, if you're a mom or dad, go to your school, look what's there, look what they're feeding, talk about it, talk to other parents, Do you really want your kids to go to school and have the beginning of heart disease? I don't think so, And do you really want Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola to be buying off your schools? I don't think so, And so food is huge. I could go on this one. We haven't even gone to regenerative ag, but that's...
And I would love to. Let me ask you a different question, though, because I think the best thing to do is to visit regeneration.org and start to look into this, or buy the book. And the other question I wanted to ask, again, you've been doing this for a long time. If you were starting out today, whether it was as a worker or an entrepreneur, how would you pick a career? And maybe pick a career is the wrong way to ask the question, but what problems would you be seeking to solve?
Well, it's a good question. And there's two aspects to that. The first thing I would do, and most people don't do this or won't do this, but somebody asked me, what is the most important thing I can do? And it's just a kind of funny question when you think about it. But I said, the most important thing you can do is find out where you live. People don't know where they live. They don't know the types of soil upon which their house or land is, and they don't know, they can't name the 3 migratory birds. They can't name which birds are native, and don't migrate. They can't name native plants. They can't name invasive plants. They can't name the pollinators. They don't know whose land they are on, unceded land that used to belong to people who were decimated and subject to the Holocaust of the 15th century and the 16th century in this Turtle Island. People don't know where they live. And the interesting thing about it is that when you discover where you are, then you can develop a sense of wonder, like, wow, is that hummingbird, why is that hummingbird going down at 60 miles per hour straight down? It's like, what kind of hummingbird is it? And do they only live 2 years? And does their heart beat at 400 times a minute? Yes, it does. And, do they hang upside down at night, and let go when it gets warmer? And, do they die almost every night? Yes, they do, because they can't hold that much energy. And are they coming around my house? Yeah, they are. And what kind are they? Are they honest hummingbird or this or that? And where do they come from? They came from South America. Why aren't they in Europe? All these things lead to like a fascination and understanding, of where you are. Once you know where you are, there is a sense of connectedness and respect too, and like wonder and like, wow, because we now see the world through our screens. We learn the world through our screens. We learn it through Wikipedia, through Google search, and so forth. Great. It's fantastic. It's extraordinary. But we actually haven't learned where we live.
Because it's an abstraction in that sense. And going back to like about food, the farm to table movement is about reconnecting you with where that food came from. And so if you are starting out today, it sounds like your advice is to find ways to show those local connections and the value of them.
Yeah.
A lot of folks, though, want to go into working for a big global company.
Right. That's fine.
Okay.
I'm just saying but at basis, at core, you should be a citizen of the earth and know where you live. Which is
a local phenomenon first and foremost.
It can only be local. Even if you're living in a high rise in New York. Okay. What was Manhattan? It wasn't Manhattan. It was Manhattan. Mm-hmm. Okay. Who was there? What did it look like? There's a beautiful book called Manhattan, which tells you where the streams, the rivers, the hills. It's extraordinary. And now when you walk down Fifth Avenue or you go into the park, whatever, to the Bowery, you understand our relationship to place in a very, very different way than just taking it for granted. And it gives you a sense of both respect for human endeavor, by the way. We are amazing, what we do. I'm not decrying it, but at the same time, what we've covered over, what we've, destroyed, what we have basically in our enthusiasm, to become more and more and more developed, what we have destroyed and harmed. And so go for the global corporation, go for the McKinseys, go for wherever you want, go to Wharton, do that, get your MBA. That's fine. But you're going to take a sensibility into it that's very, very different than one who's been brought up by the internet.
So the last question I want to ask is another way that our readers often ask about making a difference is to make ESG-based investments, environmental governance, social and governance-based investments. Do you think that's a good use of one's time and effort and money, or are there better ways to make an impact locally that would pay a greater dividend if you were, for instance, to help start a a consumer agricultural cooperative in your neighborhood?
ESG is fascinating because, what is it? What percentage of companies? 70% of companies have ESG ratings. It's like, it has
Them, but they're not all good.
It's almost meaningless. Yeah, no, ESG is almost meaningless. And furthermore, those corporations, are making commitments to 2050, and net zero commitments, which again have very, very little meaning. Because they're talking about offsets, and only 5% of offsets actually sequester greenhouse gases. The other 95% don't.
Mm-hmm.
Additionality. Some are about protecting, which is very, very, very good and important, by the way, but it doesn't change it. And so that's part of the ESG rating, these commitments that corporations have made to change their carbon footprint and their impact. And what's lost in that is that when you offset a loss, it is not a gain. It's like, hello.
Yeah. People tend to look at net zero as that somehow that is a balanced book, but what it is actually.
Look, I get in your wallet, I steal $20, right? And you go, wow, what happened to that $20 bill? And the next day I give you $20.
Mm-hmm.
That's what an offset is.
Yeah.
And so ESG is one thing. Michael Schumann, Schuman, is really the sort of the maven of localization in terms of the fact that our investments, because our money then goes to places that are so removed from who we are, what we are, where we are, and that when you invest locally, everything does so much better, including your investment, by the way. And furthermore, you have a connection to it, And I'm not an expert on all the wherefores and whys and hows, that he talks about, but I think that the question is, we're only here a short time, and basically, despite the ESG ratings, despite even the best ones, fact is we're destroying life and turning it into capital. That's what we're doing. You can go to the nicest company in the world, but you look in the supply chain and don't have to go very far before you see they're harming, they're destroying life. Okay.
Extractive again.
Extractive. They don't mean to. That's not on their corporate, mission statement, but that's just true. And so it's not that we should invest in companies. This is not that there aren't some really great, amazing companies in the world right now doing innovative things that are changing paradigmatically how we create products and services and sell them to each other. And they are. And so, but they tend not to be big publicly held companies. That's for darn sure. They tend to be smaller companies. They tend to be innovative companies. They tend to be entrepreneurial companies. And they're very difficult to invest in unless they're your friends or family. So it's an obstacle. But there are some great funds out there that are really, really doing. You're just going to have to use a lot of discernment, and do your homework, and you will find those places to put your money.
Well, I'll tell you, the best place I have found to do the homework is with Regeneration and Drawdown, and they have been invaluable for me as I think about how to reorient my life. Paul, I want to thank you for taking time to talk with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. I can talk more if you want, but I can, if you have 45 minutes, that's your limit. That's great.
We would love to have you back, but we like to keep this to a certain length for our listeners. They have an expectation.
Well, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for being so informed, and thank you for reading the book. I really appreciate that. I know we're going over time now, but Nexus is the most important part of Regeneration. The book is a neurotransmitter. The last 8 pages is a wormhole to the website. The website is the most important thing, not the book.
Yeah.
I'm sure my publisher wouldn't want me to say that, but I am saying that because that is where the rubber hits the road, and it's in Nexus. And thank you for seeing that and highlighting that.
Well, Paul, we will. I look forward to having you back again.
Me too. Thank you so much, Mitch.
We've been talking with Paul Hawken. He's the author of Regeneration, Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation. He's also, of course, the author of Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. Both of those books are invaluable resources for getting a sense of the broad range of ways that all of us can start to change our lives, our businesses, our economy, the world toward a more productive, regenerative, and natural outcome. Folks, I'm just awestruck to have spent that half hour talking with Paul. And I want to thank all of you for listening today, too. Please take a few minutes to share this podcast and others from Earth911 with your friends, your families, stranger on the street. Look, if you see a dog that looks like it might go home and share the podcast, tape the URL to its back. Let's get the word out there. This is Earth911 Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. We're going to be back with another conversation soon. In the meantime, I hope you will all take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and of course, let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.